Alright, so here's something that's gonna mess with your head. Jeff Bezos is worth about $180 billion. Elon Musk is worth around $250 billion. Warren Buffett is worth about $120 billion. All Americans, all getting paid in US dollars. And the dollar has lost 97% of its value since 1913. Over the last 20 years alone, the dollar's lost about 40% of its purchasing power to inflation. By every measure, the dollar is getting weaker year after year. So here's the obvious question. If these guys are so smart, why don't they just convert all their wealth to a stronger currency? The Swiss franc has been one of the strongest, most stable currencies for decades. The Singapore dollar is backed by one of the most financially responsible governments on earth. Even the Norwegian krone is backed by massive oil wealth. Why would the richest people on the planet keep their money in a currency that's actively losing value? Are they just not paying attention? Do they not know about exchange rates? Or is there something else going on here? Stick with me because the answer is gonna completely change how you think about money, currency, and how actual wealth works. Because here's the thing. Billionaires aren't keeping their money in weak currencies. They're not keeping their money in currencies at all. And once you understand what they're actually doing, you'll realize that almost everything you've been told about how to build wealth is backwards. Okay, so before we get into what billionaires are actually doing, let me just real quick blow up the premise of this whole question. Because when you say billionaires keep their money in weak currencies, you're making a massive assumption. You're assuming they keep their money in currency at all. They don't. Let me show you what I mean. Jeff Bezos is worth $180 billion. How much of that do you think is sitting in a bank account as actual dollars? Take a guess. 10 billion? 5 billion? 1 billion? Try basically zero. Almost none of Jeff Bezos' wealth is in cash. Almost all of it is in Amazon stock. He owns about 10% of Amazon. Amazon's worth about $1.8 trillion. 10% of that is $180 billion. That's his net worth. Same with Elon Musk. His wealth isn't in dollars. It's in Tesla stock, SpaceX equity, other company shares, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway stock, Mark Zuckerberg, Meta stock, Bill Gates, Microsoft stock, and a massive investment portfolio. Billionaires don't hold currency. They hold assets, stocks, real estate, companies, art, precious metals, whatever. Assets denominated in various currencies, sure, but not currency itself. So when you ask why they keep their money in weak currencies, the answer is they don't keep money in currencies. Currency is just the measuring stick, the scoreboard, but the actual wealth is in the assets. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, fine, but those assets are still denominated in dollars. Amazon stock is priced in dollars. Tesla stock is priced in dollars. So if the dollar is weak and losing value, doesn't that hurt them? Great question. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because no, a weak dollar doesn't hurt them. In a lot of cases, it actually helps them. Here's why. Let's take Amazon as an example. Amazon is a global company. They sell stuff all over the world. They have operations in Europe, Asia, South America, everywhere. When the dollar is weak relative to other currencies, Amazon's international revenue becomes more valuable when converted back to dollars. Let me break that down with numbers. Let's say Amazon makes 10 billion euros in revenue from Europe. When the exchange rate is 1 euro equals $1, that 10 billion euros equals $10 billion. Cool. Now let's say the dollar weakens. Now 1 euro equals $1.20. That same 10 billion euros in European revenue now equals $12 billion when you convert it back. Amazon made the same amount in Europe. Same number of euros. But because the dollar weakened, it's worth more in dollar terms. Jeff Bezos' net worth, which is measured in dollars, just went up. Not because Amazon did better, just because the currency moved. This is why you'll see headlines like, corporate profits hit record highs, during periods when the dollar is weak. It's not always because companies are doing better. Sometimes it's just currency math. So when you're a billionaire with assets in global companies, a weak dollar can actually boost your net worth on paper. But here's where it gets even more strategic. Billionaires use weak currencies to their advantage in another way. They borrow in weak currencies and invest in assets. Let me explain how this works. Let's say you're a billionaire and you own $1 billion worth of stock. You want to buy a $100 million mansion. What do? Most people would think, sell some stock, take the cash, buy the house. Seems logical, right? Wrong. That's what poor people do. Here's what billionaires actually do. They go to a bank and say, "Oh, $1 billion in stock. I want to borrow $100 million using my stock as collateral." The bank says, "Sure, here's $100 million at 3% interest." Now, the billionaire has $100 million in cash to buy the mansion. They still own all their stock. They're paying 3% interest on the loan, but their stock is probably growing at 8 or 10% per year, so they're making money on the spread. And here's the kicker, that borrowed money, not taxed. Loans aren't income, so they just accessed $100 million and paid zero taxes on it. This is called the buy, borrow, die strategy. Buy assets, borrow against them, die and pass them to heirs who get a stepped-up basis and pay no taxes. And if the currency is weakening due to inflation, even better, because you're paying back the loan with money that's worth less than when you borrowed it. Let's say you borrow $100 million today. Inflation runs at 3% per year for 10 years. After 10 years, that $100 million only has the purchasing power of about $74 million in today's dollars. You're paying back the loan with cheaper money. Weak currency? High inflation's actually great if you're a borrower and terrible if you're a saver. You're thinking, okay, but don't billionaires have some cash? Like for spending money and stuff? Yeah. They do, but not much. And here's the thing, when they do hold cash, they often hold it in weak currencies strategically. Why? Because of something called carry trade. This is a bit technical, but stay with me because it's fascinating. A carry trade is when you borrow money in a low interest rate currency and invest it in a high interest rate currency or asset. The difference in interest rates is your profit. Here's an example. Let's say Japanese interest rates are 0.1% and US interest rates are 5%. You borrow $1 billion from a Japanese bank at 0.1% interest. You convert that to dollars and invest in US Treasury bonds paying 5%. You're paying 0.1% on your loan and earning 5% on your investment. That's a 4.9% profit just from the interest rate difference. Now, there's currency risk. If the yen strengthens against the dollar, you could lose money when you convert back. But if you get the timing right, this is free money. Hedge funds and billionaires do this all the time. Borrow in weak, low-interest currencies. Invest in stronger, higher-interest currencies or assets. Pocket the difference, so weak currencies aren't something they avoid. They're something they use as a tool. Let me give you some real examples of how billionaires actually diversify their wealth across currencies and assets. Warren Buffett. He's got about $120 billion in net worth. Most of it is in Berkshire Hathaway stock, but Berkshire owns companies all over the world. They own businesses in Japan, the UK, Germany, wherever. Buffett's wealth is indirectly exposed to all those currencies through the companies he owns. When the dollar is weak, Berkshire's international holdings become more valuable in dollar terms. When the dollar is strong, they become less valuable. Buffett doesn't care. He's holding for decades. Short-term currency moves are noise. Carlos Slim, Mexican billionaire, one of the richest people on earth. Most of his wealth is in Mexican pesos through his telecom companies. The peso is way weaker than the dollar. Does he convert everything to dollars? Nope. Because his businesses operate in Mexico, they earn pesos. Their value is in pesos. Converting to dollars doesn't make sense. Bernard Arnault, French billionaire, runs LVMH, the luxury goods company. Most of his wealth is in euros through his company stock. The euro is weaker than it used to be. Does he care? Not really. LVMH sells luxury goods globally. Weak euro actually helps because it makes European luxury goods cheaper for Americans and Asians to buy. The pattern you're seeing? Billionaires hold assets, not currency. The currency the asset is denominated in matters less than the quality of the asset itself. Now here's the part that's gonna blow your mind. Sometimes billionaires deliberately keep money in weak currencies, because weak currencies come with weak currency benefits. What do I mean by that? Countries with weak currencies often have other advantages. Lower taxes, less regulation, cheaper labor, better growth opportunities. Let me give you an example. A lot of billionaires invest heavily in India. The Indian rupee is way weaker than the dollar. $1 equals about 83 rupees. The rupee has been weakening for decades. But you know what India has? 1 billion people, a rapidly growing middle class, Huge tech sector, lots of opportunity. So billionaires invest in Indian companies, denominated in rupees, because the growth potential is insane. Same with China 20 years ago. The yuan was weak, but the growth was incredible. Investors made fortunes in yuan-denominated Chinese assets, even though the currency was weak. The currency is just the wrapper. What matters is what's inside. If you can buy into a fast-growing economy with a weak currency, you can make way more money than holding a strong currency in a stagnant economy. So let's bring this all together. Why do billionaires keep their money in weak currencies? They don't. The question is based on a false premise. Billionaires don't keep money in currencies. They keep wealth in assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, whatever. Those assets are denominated in various currencies, strong and weak. But the currency is just the measuring stick. When a currency is weak, it can actually help if you're a borrower, if you own global companies, or if you're invested in high-growth economies with weak currencies. Billionaires use currency as a tool. Borrow in weak currencies. Invest in strong assets. Benefit from interest rate differences. Hedge currency risk when needed. But they're never just sitting on piles of cash in any currency because cash loses value. The real strategy is assets, leverage, and growth. Currency is just the medium, not the destination. Now, here's what this means for you. If you're trying to build wealth, holding cash in any currency, weak or strong, is a losing strategy. Cash loses value to inflation, always. Instead, you want to own assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, skills, whatever appreciates over time. If those assets are in your local currency, fine. If they're in foreign currencies, that's fine too. The currency matters less than the asset, and if you can get access to cheap borrowing, leverage works for you too. Not as dramatically as for billionaires, but the principle is the same. Borrow cheap, invest in assets that grow faster than your interest rate, profit from the spread. This is how wealth is actually built. Not by hoarding strong currencies, by owning productive assets and using currency as a tool. Now here's a question I've been getting a lot. If billionaires are so smart about money, why don't they just buy Bitcoin or gold or other alternatives to government currencies entirely? Some do, but that's a whole different topic. If you want me to break down why billionaires do or don't invest in crypto, gold, and alternative assets, drop billionaire assets in the comments. If enough people want it, that's my next video. But for now, just remember this. Currency is a tool, not a goal. Billionaires don't keep their money in weak currencies or strong currencies. They keep their wealth in assets and use currency strategically to maximize growth and minimize taxes. The currency you earn matters way less than what you do with it. I'll see you in the next one.